Hello and welcome to The Birth of a New Dimension. So my name is Aurora, and the birth of the new dimension that I'm referring to is what happens when the formerly divergent realms of spirit and matter, and we can also replace the word spirit with pure energy or pure consciousness or abstraction, becomes completely connected to and communicative with matter. So matter is slowed down light. I like to say it is light that has the privilege of going slower than the speed of light. And it is condensed light. It's condensed into this level of density that we know as the physical world. And I say this all the time. The material world comes from matter, the root word, meaning mother. That this is like the womb or the parent. And out of this parent becomes the emanation of the child, and the child is the next level of experience that we are having. So we've been consciousness submerged in this dense level of matter, material world, for a certain amount of time. And now it is the time when we get to emerge from that level of consciousness experience and have a new expanded experience in exactly the same way that a little infant that is developing in its mother's womb is constrained, and it's in there to be protected and nourished so that it can develop, but it can't really walk around on its own, and it can't really stretch out fully, and it can't do all these different things, or eat on its own or breathe on its own. So this is the whole idea, that our consciousness is now being able to emerge into a new expanded level of reality and a new experience where there's greater degrees of freedom. And this is math talk also, because this is what I say when I talk about my flying rainbow lasagna. So hello, welcome. If you're new to these radio shows that I do, or to who I am, what is Aurora all about? So I'm a star person. I'm an emanation from the stellar network, like pure consciousness. And I came into this human physical body when the previous occupant of this body died. And the portal, or the genetic oscillation dance that has allowed me to be in this body, is a shape that I invented and that I have called the flying rainbow lasagna. So the flying rainbow lasagna is a dance that you do with your DNA. And when you do that dance, it folds and twists and morphs the DNA pattern into a new shape that hasn't been invented before this shape. And that is an exciting thing because it means you get to rearrange events. Your DNA is not just a blueprint that determines the shape of your physical body or your cellular structure. It is also a blueprint for events or structures of reality, like edifices of experience in structured reality. So it's not something that is just set in stone. This whole idea of genetic fatalism, that you are fated to experience certain things like diseases and that you can't avoid them, all of that is totally erroneous. That science is now understanding that there's a thing called epigenetics, the code that rules the code, meaning that DNA and its blueprint is like the raw materials or basic starting point of what then is expressed. It's like you take the musical score of, that some composer has written, but you as the musician and the performer get to do a great deal in terms of how you interpret that score. And you can emphasize certain things and even not play other things that you might like. You might be like, oh, that note doesn't really sound or feel good there. I'm not going to play it. And that note might be a disease like cancer or diabetes or whatever you don't want to experience. But it's not just diseases or physical malformations of your body that DNA determines. It's also experiences in reality. So you can choose not to play the melodic portion of the song that means that you drive your car off a cliff or whatever, get exploded by a bomb or any of these events that you would say are, oh, that's distasteful. I don't want to experience that. So we actually have a great deal of aesthetic choice or like freedom of expression in how we utilize our DNA, how we express our consciousness through DNA, that we're not merely automatons fated to experience the things that are written for us, or like hapless ping pong balls just bouncing around the time field. That's not what we are. And I think that there's a lot of human culture, like writing music, poetry, expression that depicts human life like that, and that there's this very destructive basic premise of, oh yeah, you're just not in charge of your own life, and life's just a pile of crap. Like, that's not true. So wait, brief pause while I save my work. In fact, not only is it not true, it's erroneous. I would say that it's a little bit of an excuse or a justification for mediocrity. I'm here in my studio, I'm a painter, I'm looking at my paintings right now. I'm responsible for everything that I paint on a panel. I don't say like, oh yeah, I know this painting is mediocre and there's drips over here and this part isn't painted right and this is the wrong color, but that's not my fault because I'm just a robotic automaton and I was forced to pick up my paintbrush and put purple over there, or I was forced to make this line crooked instead of straight. Like, I don't play that kind of game. When I make a painting, I'm like, hey, I'm the person in charge of this, whatever, 48-inch square of real estate in the material world. And I'm the person that stands behind all of the colorful molecules that I put on the surface of this panel. So it's the blame game, like passing the buck. It's like, oh, it ain't my fault. I blame that guy over there. Like, I blame my ancestors, or I blame my mom and my dad, or I blame human society, or I blame religion, or I blame government, or I blame any of these external things that are in control of my life instead of me. And all of that is really destructive and erroneous, because we are these divine miniature co-creators, that we're not meant to be separated from the divine creator, the great composer that made all this music. We are made to be and intended to be constantly in connection with the great composer and the great conductor. We're literally musicians in the symphony of life, and we were created by these wonderful, benevolent, larger entity thought structures. And they're not far distant, and they're not cruel. They're not like the God of the Bible or the God of the Torah that's like, I will smite thee. It's not like that at all. It's not a smitey type of thing. It is a partnership. Because if you think of yourself, in the position of being a composer, you're like, okay, I wrote these notes down on a little piece of paper, but what I really want to do is hear what the music sounds like. So in order to hear what the music sounds like, you're gonna need a bunch of musicians. And that's what we as living beings are. So I say this all the time also. I'm new to having a physical body, but I don't find it burdensome or choreful, even though, scrubbing the toilet is definitely choreful. But this whole idea that a lot of people are like, oh, dear me, I have to eat food, I have to chew it up, I have to poop it out, being alive is such a chore. I don't feel that way at all. I feel like, wow, like what a privilege. I'm alive. I get to walk around. I get to experience the physical world. I get to feel what it feels like when, molecules brush against my skin and when I drink water and all these different things. Like, it's an amazing privilege. So we're the musicians, our bodies are our instruments, and we're here in the symphony of life. In the symphony of life, it's not like you're just one garage band musician playing on your own with no other bandmates around you. You've got at least 3 trillion microbes just riding along in your intestines, helping you to digest your food. You've got all of these yeasts that live on the surface of your body, the tiny mites that live on your eyelashes. None of these are wrong. They're not like, oh, it's like, oh, get off my skin. Like, no, they're supposed to be there. And we live in an atmosphere with all of these amazing microbes swimming around in the atmosphere. And you got to eat food. So you got to have plants and animals around you on the same planet as you. And all of our consciousness, so that's just on the basic objective materialist level. We are connected to our environment and we need nourishment from our environment. And we in turn send out emanations that nourish our environment. But then we're also connected on a consciousness level or a purely energetic level. And so that's the idea of ethics, like interdimensional ethics and how we affect one another. So if we could look at the example of a guitar that has 6 strings on it, if you pluck the string that is, furthest to one side, the string that is on the other side, even if you don't touch it physically, it vibrates sympathetically. And that's what it's called in music, sympathetic vibration. That stimulating one particular string or creating a vibration creates a complementary vibration in other strings that's their response just to being in proximity to that original vibration. So we're all doing this to one another all the time. Your DNA are like vibrating guitar strings or like piano strings. They're very complex. We have many of them inside of our bodies. And we're constantly emitting this wonderful music. And that music is affecting all of the other life forms around us, and we in turn are being affected by the emanations of all of the other life forms around us. We are musicians in a symphony. We send out music, and our ears or sensory apparatuses also listen to the music of other animals, plants, consciousnesses, the planet, the stars. So yeah, you're not just swimming around in your own private kiddie pool of consciousness, even though it might feel that way because of what I jokingly refer to as the squashing, the genetic degradation. What happened about 10 or 20,000 years ago to humanity on Earth was a sudden and devastating degradation of the behavior and potential and expression power of DNA. That human DNA was changed. It's like the system got hacked, and we changed from being incredibly healthy, incredibly genius level, intelligent, sophisticated beings that ate pure sunlight. Like this is what like my origin. If you'd be like, Aurora, like what's it like where you come from? Like, yeah, we don't shop at the grocery store. Like that level of consciousness is direct connection to the stellar network without the need for any intermediaries. So not only are there no mythological intermediaries, rather, like an angel or a saint or a Jesus or a Jehovah or something that intercedes and it says, I'm not God, I'm the conduit to God. Like I'm going to relay your messages back and forth and you have to speak through me. Like there's no intermediary in terms of consciousness, and there's no intermediary in terms of energy. Like right now we have plants and chloroplasts as the necessary intermediaries to catch photons, which are literally thoughts coming from the stellar network, and turn it into food that we can actually eat, like starches and sugars. So where I used to live in Humboldt County, that's, Northern California, we had a lovely apple tree at the end of my driveway. And I used to say, here on my radio broadcasts, that apple tree would think all year long in conjunction with the sun and the stellar network about growing fruits and, also growing more tissues and leaves and, cellulose and everything like that. And then at the end of the year, I could climb up that tree and get the wonderful thought forms that are called apples, and I could eat them with some nice good almond butter or put them in my juice, whatever. So now I've moved. I live in a different location now. I live in Southern California. But we have around our neighborhood beautiful citrus trees. And even though it's January right now, this time of year, everything is still like very vibrant and blooming and giving off beautiful fruits. And so I can walk around my neighborhood and I can pick an orange off of the tree. And I understand that that orange is a thought form that was originally emanated as like a potential in the form of pure light. Pure information. Like think about a fiber optics cable here on Earth. That's a cable that carries information that's in the form of light. And that is what photons are. That's what the emanations from the stars are. And the stars, I've said this too, are not dead, nuclear furnaces floating in the sky or random things that just kind of emit lots of light and heat and magnetism. No, they are very intelligent, very alive portals of consciousness with a sense of self, and what they send out is intentional. Just like when I paint something on my painting, I put those molecules of colorful paint there intentionally. So the stellar network is sending out all the time these very intentional consciousness emanations that are creative, just like my paint emanations are creative. And when you have a partnership like the chloroplast, that is part of the orange tree that's across the street from me, then the chloroplast catches those thought forms, that information in the form of pure light, and it translates it into an actual fruit that has, sugars and starches that I can put in my body. I gotta grind it up with my flapping, moving mouth parts and put it in my tummy and get the help of all of those trillions of gut microbes to actually turn it into available nutrients for my body. And that's a lot of intermediaries to come between myself and the sun or the stars, and the sun and the stars, that's really like the emanation. That's where we came from. It's the source and it's also the destination. I'm just drinking some water here. So really, that's us up there. Like, there's no difference. There's no distinction between what you see in the sky, the beautiful sun, and all the stars that you are able to see at night. That's all us. And it's a giant neurology up there. That's me. That's my consciousness collective. That's where I come from. I'm a star person. And yeah, so I have lots of funny anecdotes about when I first came into this body, how I tried to eat just nothing but pure sunlight and didn't understand why that wasn't enough to actually make my body go. So I learned, like in the first couple of months that I was here, that we're in an intermediary time where, although it might be convenient to think, like, I'm just going to jump directly to being a light eater and I'll save on my grocery bills. But I've been here for about 16 years. I came here in 2001, and I've had to learn that I'm in transition. Like, the physical form that I'm wearing, that I'm in, that I'm invested in, is in transition. Just like the planet Earth herself is in transition from this present state of embedded in the material world density into a different state that is less dense. The entire planet is undergoing this transformation of consciousness, and of course we as organisms that live on the planet or in conjunction with her journey are also undergoing the same kind of transformation. So it's been a long time. So yeah, I've definitely had to supplement my pure light diet with plenty of physical food. And also I kind of laugh because my body is very slender, and people often ask me like, oh, are you a vegan or vegetarian? Not here to offend anyone else, but no, I'm really not. I eat meat, but I eat meat that is produced ethically. Like, I don't eat factory farmed meats. So where I was in Humboldt, there were a lot of farms up there, a lot of grass-fed cows that you could see really roaming in the fields. And so I was able to get that from up there. And where I am here in the Southern California area, there's a wonderful local butcher that they have their own ranch. Their animals are treated humanely. They live outside. They don't live in horrible cages. And the meat is, wonderful, good quality. Because my body needs a lot of energy because I do this flying rainbow lasagna dance, genetic oscillation. It's not like I just do it for an hour a day. Like, I do it for an hour or more a day, but it's like I don't stop. Just like you don't stop metabolizing just because you aren't on the treadmill anymore. Like, just because you're not running, it doesn't mean your body isn't burning calories. So I'm lasagna-ing, doing this lasagna dance all the time, even if I'm not specifically, doing my dance, wearing my headphones, listening to music. So it requires a ton of energy, more energy than my body can refine out of physical substantive food, even if I ate like 12 sticks of butter a day. And I don't think that would be possible. Like, I think that would definitely give me a tummy ache. So I eat as much as I can of high quality, nutrient dense food that, is in this time of place. But I don't eat sugar. I don't eat refined sugars. And that's my garage. Hold on a second. Sorry for the noise of the garage there. I don't eat refined sugar, and I don't eat like flour and bread and pasta and a lot of stuff like that. And that's because I'm also dealing with epilepsy as an artifact of the brain injury that killed the previous occupant of this body. So I had to go through a whole adventure of first learning about food, and I ate whatever anybody ate in this time and place. Like, I ate all sorts of sugary stuff, and I even drank caffeine, and I smoked tobacco, and I did when in Rome, do as the Romans do. I totally did that. And then I had to learn after a few years, like, wow, just because people do it with their human body doesn't mean that it's necessarily good for the body, and that there are definitely a lot of things that are not substances that are right for me. It's like alcohol. Like, I can't drink alcohol because that is just not good for my brain. And there's so much sugar in the processed diet that is in grocery stores that I started to learn if I needed to avoid sugar or corn syrup or additives like that, then I pretty much needed to make my own food. So then I used to watch cooking shows a lot too, because I had to learn how to make my own food. So all of that, I've been on a journey of coming to respect the human body and its needs more and more. And it's kind of like if you had an animal, like a domesticated animal, a pet, a dog, a horse, something like that. At first, you might not know how special and sophisticated its body system is. And you're like, oh yeah, like that's just my animal. But then at a certain point, you're like, wait a minute, as I learn more about this, I'm like, this is very sophisticated. The way that everything fits together, the way that everything thing works. So I had to learn about gut microbes. I had to learn about nutrition and different types of nutrients and what is the best way to feed the human body in general and my body specifically. And that was interesting because I also at the same time was learning about organic gardening techniques and how to grow. I grow medical cannabis to help with my epilepsy. How to learn how to grow it without putting a bunch of chemicals and other non-food safe items on the plant, because I do juicing of the leaves. And I advocate for this. I advocate for everyone to be able to grow their own cannabis in their yard. I think you shouldn't have to have a special license for it, but whatever. Grow your own cannabis and then be able to juice the leaves the same way you would juice a tomato or wheatgrass or whatever. Put it through your juicer and drink it in the morning. Because raw cannabis juice is not psychoactive. I have nothing against psychoactivity, but I'll talk a little bit about that too. It is not psychoactive. It does not cross the blood-brain barrier. It has not been decarboxylated. So it's literally, there's no way to overdo it. There's no way to drink too much of it or have a bad trip or anything like that. And you can give it to a tiny infant. You could give it to a really old person and anybody in between. And it doesn't go against any other prescriptions or anything else that you might have to take to stay alive. So yeah, I'm a huge advocate for everyone on earth being able to have access to this plant, grow it in your garden, juice it like a vegetable. And that's a big part of what I do for my own health and vitality. Let me do a brief aside here on psychoactivity. So I have no problem with the idea of, whatever THC that is. Like I use mostly CBD in terms of, healing and protecting my brain and neurology, and to be able to overcome the neurological deficits and, like the damage that was done in this body, so that I could be here, so that I, as Aurora, could be in this body. Because it's kind of like I moved into a house that had damage from a house fire. And you move in, it's like, the rafters are burned down and there's smoke damage and there's water damage and all sorts of things. And so you have to rebuild, and then you also have to, clear things out. So it's been many, many years of clearing and rebuilding and rewiring. So I didn't used to know this word, but now I know the word is neuroplasticity. The idea that if the original circuitry has been harmed or degraded or whatever, inhibited in some way, that different areas of your brain or your neurology can take up the mantle and start doing it anyway. So I had lost my math skills as part of the brain damage. I didn't have math skills when I first came here as Aurora, and I didn't understand or recognize numbers. So when you look at my artwork, and you can check out my artwork, free plug for me, by going to my website. It's flyingrainbowlasagne.com. It's lasagna with an E on the end. And you can check it out and see like my artwork is highly mathematical. But I don't necessarily do this math by doing, Arabic numerals, 1 + 1 = 2, even though I have that capacity now. But what I do is inner visualizations that look to me like circles or packets coming together, and doing calculations on that level, like a symbolic level different than the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 type of symbols that we're used to learning about in math class. And it's interesting to learn about vortex-based math, because this is human math and science and I want to say thought structure coming up to speed with the idea that equations can be expressed not merely as a linear equation, but also as a shape that has vectors of force or directions in which energy travels, creating either doubling or halving or adding, subtracting, or some aspect of calculation. That a shape can literally be a calculation. So that's necessary integuments that everyone can start to understand what the flying rainbow lasagna is. It's an equation. It's a paragraph or a sentence or a concept that is written in the language of vibration. And when you put it all together, it has a profound effect, or there are profound implications for what each one of us can do with our physical body. So I've been able to not only be in a physical body, but also heal the physical body that I occupy, because it was like a house that had burned down. There were lots of things that needed to be fixed. So that's, just on the basic level, like to be able to express myself through words and to do math and to administrate and to do all the things that I do, including move my arms and legs and paint paintings. All of that has required a great deal of rewiring. So on the topic of psychoactivity, so I have no problem with people, taking THC, and that has a psychoactive effect and can make you feel, otherworldly, or like you're not expressing your ordinary mundane thought patterns. And I don't find that there's anything inherently wrong with that. However, everybody needs to use personal encryption on their DNA and on their consciousness so that if you start to go into these alternate realities or mental planes, or what some people might call the astral plane. It's funny because astral comes from stars, like, it's the same root word. We're talking about a world like a dream world that is created purely out of mind. And there's nothing inherently wrong about visiting there, but you got to do it responsibly. And this is the same teaching like when I teach about the Merkaba, which means light body vessel. And it's a visualization that is very powerful that you can use to protect your body and also to travel through space, time, and consciousness. And it's a birthright. Everybody should be able to go where they want to go. You shouldn't have to ask anybody's permission, just like you should be able to drive wherever you want to in your car. But there are some neighborhoods that it is not sensible to visit. And if I'm a responsible teacher or I'm a responsible person like giving you the car keys, I would never be like, sure, take the car keys, go wherever the heck you want, and like I won't give you a map and figure it on out yourself. It's like, no, because then you will go to the bad areas of town where people will, like carjack you or slash your tires or whatever. So it's really essential when you do any kind of interdimensional travel to do protection and have a map and know where you're going and go in a sensible way and lock your car when you get there and make sure you have enough gas to get back home. So this is my caveat or my issue or whatever, challenge I'm having with the idea of using psychedelics in any way. And THC, like if you take enough doses of it, if you take a high enough dose of the medicine, it can be highly psychedelic. So, and again, I don't have any problem with people doing that. You should do it responsibly. So now, like this goes also into the idea of taking magic mushrooms or LSD or ayahuasca. That, first of all, I don't consider any of those things to be like recreational substances, like party drugs that you should take, go into a disco. I don't think that that's the right thing to do at all. But I do feel that everybody has the right to experiment with their own mind, with their own brain chemistry, to explore these otherworldly realms, do it in a sensible way. So, if I were a parent and I had a kid and it was time for them to start driving the car, I would be like, okay, great. Like you got to learn about the car. You got to learn how to navigate effectively. You have to learn about learn how to read a map. Learn how to know where you're going and look at street signs. Learn where are the good neighborhoods, where are the bad neighborhoods, and, lock your car. Like when I say that, that's personal encryption. Lock up your DNA. Make sure that you don't get any unwanted entities coming into your DNA structure just because you're taking an augmentation that then makes you vulnerable to their entry. Because it's a form of technology. Literally, taking ayahuasca is a form of technology of consciousness, and it's augmentation. So it means that if you did all of the muscle work, like if you did all the weightlifting in the non-physical world, eventually you would get into that visionary state without having to take any plant substances. It's like that, and that mental visionary state is our birthright. We're supposed to be able to use our higher faculties and to see through time and to do all this different stuff. And so it's not like you need anybody's permission. But at best, magic mushrooms, ayahuasca, psychedelics, these are like training wheels. And it might give you a temporary artificial boost to be able to do it. But the whole idea is you're supposed to do the work, earn the muscles, run the marathon, and get the vision. And if you don't do that, then you can get visions prematurely and you can get visions that are distorted. And it's so crucial in this journey to get the information accurately and at the right time. Because if someone can give you totally accurate information, but at the wrong time, thereby skewing your trajectory. It's like literally a trajectory, like a baseball flying through the air or a helicopter flying through the sky. It's your trajectory through time. So if I'm like, oh, I'm going to give you some information that you're only supposed to have in 6 years after you go through a whole, extensive training program, and I'm going to give it to you now, though. It's like through training wheels, like the augmentation. I'm going to give it to you 6 years early. Then that person might not be well prepared for that information, and it might also send them down a pathway that's not where they're supposed to go yet. So there's real questions. It's like instead of earning a library card and then go into the library and reading the books in order of the encyclopedia that you're supposed to read, it's like breaking into the library and just pulling random books off of the shelf, or just like ripping pages out of books and then saying, look at me, I'm really learning. But it's like, that's not really learning. So I think that is the danger, that a lot of people right now in this very twisted, I want to say self-destruct, we are in a society that fosters and encourages self-destructive behavior. So we're in this world where a lot of people are just like, my mind hurts, get me out of here. Like, I'll take any substance, I'll shoot up anything. I just want to get out of this mental state. And then a lot of people will take a psychedelic in an effort to reach an exalted mental state. And it's not the real way to get there. It's using augmentation. And then here's the real danger. Let's say you take a bunch of magic mushrooms, and then a voice in your head or some deep sense of knowing tells you, like you're a messiah, or you're, like you're God incarnate. And then you come back from your trip and you're like, I'm the Messiah, I am God. Well, the truth is you are the Messiah and you are God. We all are the Messiah. We all are God. Learning that information out of order and without the proper context and without the proper guidance can make people jump to their erroneous conclusions and behave poorly. And so that's what has happened. I'll tell you this also, I say this on my show all the time. You've been everyone. Like, if anyone wants to give you a past life reading or some kind of hypnotic regression so that you can find out who you were in a past life, I will save you $5. I will save you however much they're going to charge you. I hope they don't charge you a lot of money for doing that. You don't have to go and get some kind of a session. We have all been everyone. You've been everyone. So if you take one of these regressions and it's like, oh, I'm regressing back. I was Picasso. I was Vincent van Gogh. I was Marilyn Monroe. Like, yeah, you were those people. And you were also a lot of other people too. So giving people information out of order can be horribly self-destructive, because you get a regression and you find out, oh, you were Hitler. You were Hitler. I was Hitler. Everybody's been Hitler. If that's the only information that you learn and that you focus on, and you don't have the context in order to be able to digest or properly apply that information, then it just becomes destructive. So when I'm talking about augmentation or the use of some type of artificial technology like training wheels of your mind to get to heights that you would not ordinarily be able to fly or jump up to those heights, that's the danger. That it's information taken out of context without the proper guidance of how to apply it to your life. So, things like ayahuasca in the ancient world, that was something that was used ceremonially and only for people who were initiates, and they did their muscle building. They prepared for the marathon, and then they were, guided in their experience. And also the idea that you're not supposed to take it all the time. Maybe you take it once or twice, and then you get rid of your training wheels. So people might have had experiences, of taking mushrooms or LSD. Again, I'm not judgmental about this, but I think people think like, oh, she wears rainbow clothes, she's a hippie, she gotta be like pro LSD or something like that. Like they think that I have a pocket full of LSD. I'm like, no, I don't have a pocket full of LSD. In fact, I've never taken psychedelics, and I have to be really careful with my brain because I'm dealing with epilepsy, so I can't take stuff like that. So all of my paintings that I paint come from inner vision, and they come from me, I call it booking time on the inner telescope. That your higher faculties, your insight, your eye of time, the chakra that's on the forehead of your body that connects through the crown of your mind into, the God mind, that's your birthright. Everybody is supposed to be able to see using that inner eye. And because we've been genetically degraded, and because we are living in this technological soup, it can be very hard to see. It can be hard to activate those faculties. So that's why I understand a lot of people are like, I will just take a drug and that will give me my inner vision. But what everybody really needs to do is cultivate your real muscles. So here's the difference. It's like, say, there are some people in life who have been going to the gym and doing their running and doing their stretching, and they're ready for the marathon. They've got muscles on their body that can do the work. And then there are some people that have been sitting on the couch the whole time, and they never did the stretching, and they never did the muscle building. They literally don't have those muscles, and they also have a lot of extra baggage or, like excess weight. And then those people can't do the marathon. But then let's say they're like, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get some kind of a technically augmented exoskeleton. And my exoskeleton is then going to go clamp onto my overweight body and move my limbs for me and make me run 26 miles. And then I'll run a marathon. And that is what I'm seeing a lot of people doing with psychedelics in this world. Like really, in order to have inner vision, what you're supposed to do is spend many years cultivating your mind, cultivating your consciousness, learning to create an interior experience of inner silence, like to not constantly verbalize in your mind, to learn to control your mind, to learn to understand emotions and emotional reactions, to understand your own characteristics, to have some idea of, I want to say, like a value system. Because if you're just going to hop in your interdimensional car and drive any place, like it's like driving to Times Square. Like there's prostitutes there, or there used to be. I don't know if they're still there, but like it's driving to the worst places in the city. You can't just be like, sure, here's the car keys, kid, drive to the city. Like, no, there are drug dealers and prostitutes and all sorts of things that you want to avoid, and mafiosos and hitmen and everything, people that want to steal from you. So yeah, you want to stay away from all of that. So my caveat is that I feel many people are using hallucinogens for escapism. They are not properly shielded. They don't necessarily have the discernment to tell who is a loving, godly, divine entity and who is not. Because it's so easy, like if you go to Times Square and you're a total rube, to have someone come along and be like, oh yes, I'm a real taxi driver. Get in my car. I'll take you where you want to go. And they're like, they're not a real taxi at all. And they're just going to kidnap you and, beat you up and steal your money. Like that would be too easy if you take a psychedelic and then someone comes along and says, I'm a god. Listen to me, I'm really divine. And he's like, oh, sure, I'll get in your car, fake God. And then the fake God can totally beat you up and steal your money. And that's what entity attachment is. That a lot of people go into this vulnerable, porous, open consciousness state in, having a psychedelic experience. And then these totally malevolent, self-serving entities come along and they say, hi, I'm God. Like, let me come into your body. I'm going to blah, blah. I want to blah, blah, blah. Like, if anybody comes along in some telepathic way and says to you, hey, I'm God, let me into your body, you got to be like, wait a minute, if you're God, why do you want my body? What happened to your body? Like, start thinking critically, even though I know it can be hard to do critical thinking if you're having a psychedelic experience, but you really have to ask these questions, like, what happened to your body? Where are you? Why are you there? Because the real answer is, and let me just save my work, hold on. The real answer is that most of these entities that verbalize, that speak to you verbally, that come up to you and they say, hey, like, I'm God, listen to me. Mostly they are just those pesky occupiers of the interstices. They are turds that refuse to flush, or consciousness residue that is smeared around the outer edge of the event horizon, as opposed to having plunged into the next dimension, through the portal of the black hole. That they are stuck. They're stuck on the membranes of time. They're stuck on the interstices. They lost their bodies long ago. They intentionally smashed their guitars on stage. They got rid of their instruments. And now they're like, oh, you have a nice guitar. I want to play it. But it's like, wait. If you want to play a guitar, you got to be in the time field. You have to get born. And in order to get born, that means that you have to conform your consciousness to certain patterns, and your body also has to conform to certain patterns. You can't just be an aberration, a thing that's not supposed to exist. You got to have the correct cellular structure and the correct energy structure and the correct genetic structure. And if you don't have any of those things, then you become a non-viable pregnancy. No offense to anyone that has ever had a miscarriage. I'm not saying that your potential offspring was a monster. I'm saying that that potential offspring didn't get the notes right in the symphony and had to try again. And so that's the whole idea, that these malevolent beings intentionally play the wrong notes. They know they're bad musicians. They have no intention of playing along with the symphony of life. That's why they got kicked out of the band. So that's why they don't have guitars. So that's why they're like, wait, I want to play somebody's guitar, like you. I'm going to pretend to be God, and then I'm going to jump inside of your body and play your guitar. None of that is cool. So all of that, I know there was a long diatribe in order to tell everyone my feelings about the use of psychedelics. So I'm not some, moralistic prude that is saying, oh no, like don't drink caffeine, don't eat chocolate, don't dance, don't dance to music, and no. Everybody has a birthright to be able to explore different mental states and use their body and their energy to do what they need to do. But that you should do it in a responsible way, just like expressing sexuality. Like everybody should be allowed to express their sexuality. It is part of your birthright, but to do it appropriately, consensually, respecting the life force energy and the effect that you're having on the time field by doing what you're doing. So I see a lot, like that's what I'm talking about. There's just so much healing that needs to happen in terms of this society. It's like a very sexually degraded society. Yeah, so ideally, if you wanted to achieve a psychedelic or visionary mental state, you wouldn't have to take a bunch of drugs. What you could do is eat the right food, ingest a bunch of sunlight, live away from electrosmog, like the unmitigated EMF fields, spend time meditating, spend time doing the proper self-cultivation exercises, because I don't mean like CrossFit. I don't mean stuff that's just about muscle building. I mean actually cultivating the body to be in these proper divine patterns of energy. So there are some exercises that really help people to do that. And to not have to be a part of the mundane thought structure that we often have to be a part of in order to earn money. So, it's like going into a state of bliss. How do I do the flying rainbow lasagna? Because the flying rainbow lasagna is like having a psychedelic experience, but not one that is induced by taking a substance. It is induced through willpower and also fostering that creative activity. So I'll use making artwork as an example. It's hard to make artwork, and what makes it easier is having an edifice like a studio. And if you have your studio or whatever is your thing, to do yoga or to do exercise, having a place that is a physical location dedicated to that place helps. Because when your body goes into that edifice, it knows, oh, this is the room where I do this activity. So it's like you go into the room, you're like, oh, this is the room where I do my writing of poetry, or where I do my meditation, or where I do my yoga, or where I do my painting. So for me, it's painting. So when I go into my studio, my body knows, like, oh, it is now time to paint. And what I do is I cultivate my levels of consciousness to be able to go into this higher or visionary state, without having to take, it's very impractical to take ayahuasca every day, but I do my painting every day, and I dance like a flying rainbow lasagna every day. So it's kind of like, it's something, being creative is a miraculous activity, and it's something that none of us should take for granted. If you are writing a song, writing a poem, painting a painting, whatever it is, creating something new, that's a miraculous activity. You're like a divine miniature version of God, the great composer, creating a little thing here. And it's what we're meant to do. It's a very, appropriate and divine activity to be doing. How do you do it? How do you do it? It ain't easy. Like, there's a reason why there's a lot of cubicle dwellers, driving to work with their briefcases and coffee every day. It's like that. It's hard to get into this mental state of being able to create something new that hasn't been created before. So having an edifice to do it and doing it every day, because it's just like training your body. If you walk every day, then your muscles are like, okay, we're ready to walk. So if you do it's your practice. You do your practice every day and cultivate it, and each day builds on the foundation of the previous day, so that any creative activity, if it's painting or if it's music, what you practiced and played and did the day before, that is like the fuel for what you're doing the next day. And each day is like, a footstep on the journey. So it's like, you don't just start from a totally stopped position, and then try to jump over the high jump, as an athlete. You take a running leap, you run, and then you jump and make a big high jump. So in terms of making some creative project, you got to get creative momentum. That's what I mean. Like, you do it every day. So, you do sketches, you do preliminaries, you do color studies, you make drawings, you even looking at things. You look at things, you look at paintings, you look at drawings, you look at flowers and the way that things are colored and formed. And then all of that goes into the soup, and then you begin to express yourself. So getting into a visionary mental state is not just something like snap your fingers, get into a visionary mental state. I think that's why people take a substance to get into that mental state, because it's actually way more difficult and way more expensive in terms of time, energy, and what this society rewards. Like, most people have to be like, I have to go to my mundane job and work there and use my mind in a certain way for 8 hours a day. Then I'm free to go home at the end of the day and do what I want to do with my mind. But you just spent 8 hours a day using your mind in an uncomfortable way. So a big part of this is, it's like being able to flow from moment to moment. Like, I feel like doing this, now I feel like doing this, now I feel like doing this. Because most people are carrying the briefcase and the coffee and going to work every day, and they don't get to flow from moment to moment. So that's a big part of it. And also, I'll tell you, our society is set up intentionally to constrain mental activity, to make it hard to get into those visionary states. It's intentional. You're not going to just go into a visionary state, after you get home from work at 8 p.m. or, on the weekends and holidays. It's just like, you're not going to run a marathon after 8 p.m. or on the weekends and holidays. If you want to run a marathon, it's a commitment to training for it every day and prioritizing it. So that's what it's like, the shortcut or the augmentation of taking a substance to get into these mental states is because it is actually way harder and requires way more investment of time and energy and consciousness to be able to do it without those substances. But we do need to recognize that we're not only constrained by the need to earn money and what society rewards, but we are constrained by the infestation of technology, because I really notice that there are some apparatuses that it's harder for me to do my thing around. Like, when I've been in an actual city that had not only a lot of other people, and people are, creating their own thought structures and they're affecting you. Other musicians are playing their own music and you can hear it, but also, just tons and tons of uncontrolled electromagnetic signals from Wi-Fi and wires and there's just so much going on that it's very, very difficult to get to those mental states. And that's why beings like Sasquatch, beings of pure consciousness, virtuosos of the consciousness world, they stay far away from cities. They're like, that place stinks. Literally, it psychically stinks. It smells bad. It feels bad to be there. So I myself have a limited shelf life of being able to be in a giant uncontrolled megalopolis. And I really find that in order to think clearly and do these creative acts, it's necessary for me to be in places that have, much more of less population and more of a natural world, more of a connection to the natural world. So that's a big part of it. When I tell you about where I come from, and I can remember what the society of Atlantis, the antediluvian, sophisticated worldwide culture was like before the genetic squashing. So it's not just like, we didn't eat physical food, we just didn't do anything. Like, no. We did stuff, because you have to do sun gazing, but it's not just sun gazing. It's also the idea that the environment, what we made around us, fed us. So here in my household now I have a refrigerator. It's like 6 feet tall and it holds all my food, and we spend a lot of energy keeping things cold so that we can eat that food. But in another time and place, the edifices were like giant crystals. Like imagine a giant 6 foot tall rose quartz crystal that was part of the infrastructure of your household. Like just like we wouldn't consider having a house, a civilized house, without a running refrigerator. In a different world, we would not consider having a civilized house without these incredibly large crystals that are, containers for energy and also conduits for energy to flow through. And in the same way that a Zen garden, like the Buddhist wants to create a peaceful garden, that the act of creating it is peaceful, and then you can sit there in meditation and feel that peace reflected back to you. That the environment literally feeds a sense of peace. It's like the antithesis of living in Los Angeles or some giant megalopolis. It's the same way with that antediluvian society, that everything was structured like a Zen garden. To be a beautiful, harmonic, and peaceful environment, you put peaceful energy into the environment, and then the energy reflects back into you. So it's not just the question of, you just didn't eat food, like nothing went in. Food was consumed, but the food was the food of beauty, like beautiful sights, beautiful feelings, beautiful edifices or arrangements around us. And aesthetic arrangements. Right now we live in a world that is very not aesthetic. Like the cities are ugly and things are just put together in the cheapest, most brutal, convenient fashion, that just to get things done. And that not only doesn't feed the body, the human body, but it literally degrades it. It is degrading to the biology and energy centers, and like it's not by accident or coincidental that a lot of people are facing infertility, especially people that live in places like New York City. It's because that place is not harmonically friendly to being able to conceive life. The process of conception is a miraculous thing that happens that is kind of like, you could call it geometry, but it's like that perfectly formed vibrational pattern being expressed through the genetic material of two partners, and that leads to life. And it's a miracle. It's not by accident that it's really hard for a lot of people to conceive of a baby in the totally disharmonic structure of a city. There's lots and lots of infertility. So it's not just like, pollution, like you're breathing in too much diesel fumes or something like that, or like there's too much, dust on your food. It's not that type of pollution, although that doesn't help. Glyphosate, is a terrible contaminant that is in the food supply. It's not just that. It's the pollution of the energy field, that it is making it hard for people to actually come together and conceive new life, which is, using harmonics to create a benevolent energy field for a new little baby to come in. Yet that doesn't happen. So we have infertility, but the infertility is also saying, like, this is not a garden that is a good place for a seed to grow. There's a reason why babies are not being conceived easily through natural means in, places like New York City, because that's not really a good place for babies to live. And, where's a good place? And everybody in our society knows this. They're like, why raise a child in the city? Shouldn't they have a yard where they can play and run around and not be in, atmosphere where that's full of diesel fumes? But it's more than that. It's the idea of being able to be free and to be unencumbered and to grow in an environment that feeds you as a person. So yeah, this place like New York City, Los Angeles, like these are not environments that are suitable for most life forms. There are dogs that have anxiety because they live in New York City. Like, that's because dogs are supposed to be able to run around and feel grass and not be stressed out because they're exposed to traffic and loud noises all the time. Like, the city is incredibly loud and chaotic. And of course, it makes horses feel stressed out. It makes dogs feel stressed out. It makes humans feel stressed out. But humans put this glamour, this, veneer, this vanity layer on top of the harmful after effects of living in a city. They're like, oh yeah, but if you live in a city, like there's status to being there, and like you're a cool person, and you get to eat out at restaurants. Like it's so they make it seem like, oh, it's desirable and good, and you got to pay a lot of money for your rent. But it's like you pay a lot of money to live in an incredibly energetically polluted place that is not good for your biology or your emotions or your spirituality. So that's another thing. If you're like, okay, like I want to achieve a visionary experience or have a psychedelic experience, naturally living in a city, like that ain't gonna happen. That whole edifice and structure of the city is designed to prevent your consciousness from raising up into ecstatic levels. Now I'll do a contrast. To contrast that with the idea of an opera hall or a cathedral, one of these harmonically shaped like concert halls where before amplified music and recorded music was invented, people would go to have a transcendent experience. The idea that you could place your physical body in a physical, like egg-shaped room, like it's kind of shaped like a parabola that amplifies the sound and makes it wash over your body. And it's like literally having a sound bath. And that experience of being exposed to those vibrations can give people an uplifted or ecstatic or euphoric experience. Everybody was not taking LSD, but everybody, in some of these religious experiences, people had religious experiences hundreds of years ago when they went to the cathedral and they heard the music and the chanting and the singing that was there, because it fed them from that level. My words aren't working, but I think you're getting the idea that you can go into an environment that is harmonically proportioned, where the vibrations that are emitted there and that your body is exposed to, and that are being amplified, give you an uplifting effect. That just as much as a city dissipates your energy, makes you feel crappy, that going to a concert or an opera in a concert hall or hearing, the music that was performed in churches in an actual cathedral, that there's a reason why people went there, to feel more divine, and that that was the escapism of the time. People lived in a very disease-ridden, very dirty place. I'm thinking like, Europe in like whatever, the 15, 16, 1700s. And that going to a performance in a cathedral or an opera house was escapism, and it gave people a momentary respite from the unsatisfying, not aesthetic world that they were exposed to, and that all of a sudden they were exposed to a beautiful aesthetic world. And so, yeah, if we want to, have these experiences, have these higher mental state experiences, it's totally possible, but we have to rearrange our architecture. Change the way we build buildings, change the way we build sidewalks and pathways, and where we have cars that are allowed to drive, and where we place metal guardrails. Like all of these architectural structures are inhibiting our free flow or free expression of our consciousness, so that we're not able to really fly to the heights we want to. And P.S., that ain't by accident. That's all intentional. So it's part of the big healing that we have to have as we are here, as we are restructuring society. So I got off track from the idea of matter and energy coming together. But what we're doing now with our minds we are creating physical matter that responds to our thoughts. Like if you could imagine whatever, some kind of magical silly putty, that if I think in a certain way, it turns into this. If I think in a certain way, it turns into this. That's what matter is now. We're in a different world. You could consider it a dream world, but you are the architect. You get to create and imagine and envision a much more divinely structured world around you that actually feeds you and everyone else. So thank you for being with me on the journey.